Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 344, and today's guest is Wardah Inam, founder and CEO of Overjet. Building a company in an underserved industry has its pros and cons. Yes, it's nice to have less competition and a head start. But on the flip side, it might be harder to raise funding if it isn't a sector of interest for investors, or it might be even tougher to acquire customers because you have to educate the market. But if you can build it and the market is ready, it can be magic, just like you'll hear from Wardah's interview. Based on a personal dental experience, she recognized a problem and embarked on a journey to build a dental AI platform, which ended up being the first FDA-approved solution. From detecting oral disease with unmatched precision, to educating patients with clearly annotated images, to getting insurance claims approved 5 times faster, Overjet is the dental AI platform that lets dental professionals put patients first and operate efficiently. Back in March of this year, the company announced a $53.2 million Series C round of funding, which is the largest investment ever in an AI for dentistry company, and it brings the total funding to date at approximately $133 million. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Wardah's background story, including how she got started in building autonomous robots during undergrad, her history as an entrepreneur starting multiple companies, and her early experience working with AI, the full story of Overjet, and how a lucky Uber pool ride helped her get started in terms of building expertise in the dental industry, all the details about the company's platform and value, plus the current state of the company, fundraising advice for underserved markets and how the Overjet story evolved over time, the importance of velocity for a startup, and so much more. Okay, quick side note, do you subscribe to the VentureFizz podcast? If not, please click that subscribe button on your favorite streaming service of choice, as we are on all the majors, that being Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and SoundCloud. You'll also see our full catalog of over 300 past interviews with leading entrepreneurs and investors. It's like an entrepreneurial MBA. All right, without further ado, here is my interview with Wardah. Wardah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Keith, for having me here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. We were just catching up for a couple minutes, but I have to admit, I've been kind of watching your company from the sidelines, right? I stay very in tune with companies that are raising capital, especially if they kind of launched originally in the Boston market like Overjet did. I'm just like, wow, what's this company doing? And what I think is really exciting is you're in a space that is what I would consider an underserved market, yet I'm assuming is ripe for disruption, where technology is going to play a massive role in the evolution of dentistry. So what's it like kind of starting a company in a segment that maybe might be a little early to market, but now you kind of see like maybe a wave coming to this industry that's ripe for disruption?
Yeah, so I think early on, the challenge with starting in dentistry was that investors did not like dentistry as a market because they hadn't seen big examples of good success in that market. But the industry has changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years with consolidation happening, private equity money coming in, more corporate dentistry being taking off, and that has led to people focusing on technology that can help improve their practices, help give them an edge. And also the economics have just generally put a pressure on practices to perform better, perform more efficiently with the costs increasing. So the trend has been in the direction of utilizing more technology in practices, and I think we caught that wave as we entered the market. But I think that gives us an advantage as well, because there's not 100 players in the market that we have to compete with. Before this, I was in MRI data, and we had 100 players in the market with MRI, and now we don't have a very crowded space that we need to operate in. And then, but building great technology for a customer base that really has to have the efficiency, has to provide the best care. It is still difficult, but it's a doable task.
Yeah, I mean, the use case, and we're going to talk deeper about Overjet. Like, I'm not going to get into the weeds just yet. But, you're what I consider an AI native company, meaning this was your strategy from the outset, not, oh, we just saw this chat GPT thing. We need to somehow incorporate an AI strategy that there's a lot of companies I think are just trying to force it into their business model because it's like a must. Yet this gave you a strategic lead in terms of an underserved market to be this hopefully dominant player.
Absolutely. And I think the type of AI that we developed was probably one of the hard AIs to develop as well, which was like clinical AI. So being able to read X-rays at the level of how dentists do it or surpass that capability, that meant we had to hire very expensive annotators. So this wasn't, just somebody just looking at text, etc. It was somebody who knew how to process this information. With a clinical license backing them. So, and then developing at a level that would provide value to the same user base. So it had to be, it had to be as good as or better in accuracy to what dentists could do, or provide capabilities that they did not have. For our case, it was quantification. So being able to quantify some of the things that they could not do before. So that, so it took us some time to build that, and it was because of AI was critical, so computer vision, natural language processing, etc. And now we can also leverage the Gen AIs that has OpenAI and other companies have built to supercharge some of our products as well.
Yeah. All right, well, let's rewind the clock. So where did you grow up? What were you like as a child?
So I grew up in Pakistan. And as a child, I loved sports. So I was playing sports all day long, or whenever I got the chance to. And then I love sports and I love science. Like I think those were my two loves that I grew up with. And everybody in my family was very good at studies, and I focused all my time on sports. But that's my background.
Well, in school, so you were studying like you were working on autonomous robotics from what I gathered in undergrad.
Exactly. So that's in undergrad. Um, we so in my college there was actually no robotics lab, but I was very interested in robotics. So I actually ended up starting a lab, not knowing that students don't start labs, you need to be a professor. Nobody told me that, so I went, wrote a grant. I got a space. There was a room that was empty, and I asked the dean if I could have that space. I got furniture from different places. Created the lab, and I then got students onto my program as well, and some were more junior than me, some were more senior as well. I don't know how, yeah, I didn't know at that time this was not how it was done, and nobody told me that this is not how it's done. And so we ended up building our team. We started competing in international competitions with our robot, and we were probably going into these competitions with 1/10 the funding that any, or 100th even at times, the funding that any other lab had. But we built everything from scratch, and then wrote papers. Again, I have a paper where I'm the only author. I did not know that's how it should be, and was lucky to do some good research as well.
See, that story alone, I would have backed whatever you were working on in the future because it's just like that's the mindset that you want someone at that age to go on to do great things of building a company because that's what you were doing in theory. Like, you raised money, you built a team, you secured, technology and built things. Okay, so you came to the United States to pursue your studies. So what did you work on in the US?
So when I came to the US, I was focused on clean energy and increasing the adoption of solar into the grid. And I've focused on first building the technology, then more on the commercial models that would be applied, and then autonomous systems that would enable adoption of technology without changing the grid infrastructure. So those were the pieces that I worked on early on. And then I made a conscious decision to move towards healthcare. because I felt that in technology, in clean energy, a lot of the adoption of that technology was not limited by the quality of the technology, but it was being limited by policy and other factors that were coming into play. And if I wanted to have real impact in my lifetime, I wanted to be in a field that I could, build a technology and get it to market and not have external forces, and not become a politician to get my impact.
Because you were using AI in that world too, right? It was AI-driven electronics and analytics for ad hoc microgrids.
Yeah, so we were doing unsupervised learning. So in the microgrids, what that meant was that you could connect any kind of source. So say add any solar or put any load in, and the grid itself was able to learn, optimize how to transfer power so that the cost of electricity would go way down, so that it would make sense for solar to be adopted more broadly, as well as being able to do demand response automatically and other pieces that you normally need more centralized planning for. So having distributed optimization with unsupervised learning, so that the machines themselves could just configure and provide the most amount of electricity at the lowest cost possible.
Okay. So you completed your PhD at MIT. Like, how did you get your career started out of academia?
So then I did a postdoctoral fellowship as well at the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT, working on biomedical sensing using machine learning. So using wireless signals to detect heart rate, breathing, and that was my transition towards healthcare. So I at that time I said, hey, I want to move towards healthcare, and this was a project that I found very exciting, and I approached the professor and started the postdoc with them, but it was also being commercialized. So even in my PhD and in my postdoc, the projects I worked with, we always tried to commercialize them, and we were working, on doing so. And that was my postdoctoral work. And then I was talking to my one of my professors, and I was trying to figure out what am I doing next. There was a lot of interest for me to be in academia, but I felt that I could have more impact actually seeing things come to life and having products that people could utilize. And one of my professors shared with me this opportunity to work at QBio, which was a startup working on precision medicine. And then I got recruited to work there, and was there before I started Overjet.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So you're a lead product manager. So perfect segue into Overjet. So what led you down the path to start the company?
So I was, all through grad school, I was starting one company after the other. It's not on my resume, but there are quite a few things we started. One got acquired, one shut down, one I think it's still active. So we started multiple companies with friends of mine from college, and then I mentioned even the postdoctoral fellowship, that there's a company out of that work as well, and then Overjet started primarily because of my own personal experience, where I went to the dentist, and the new dentist that I changed my dentist, they gave me a treatment plan which was very different than what I had received before. And that got me interested in dental diagnosis and trying to understand why was this particular diagnosis provided to me. And the more, I learned, the more obsessed I got with dentistry, where I felt it was not only an important problem to solve. It was a societal problem. So many people didn't have access to care, and the people who had access to care, you could not say, whether it was good quality care or not. I could not tell who was right, what was really happening, and being able to then utilize technology so that you can provide high quality care to patients, as well as you can, the patients can understand their health and make the best decisions for themselves. That's the journey that started for me after going to the dentist.
All right. So we talked about earlier about the dentistry industry being underserved. So you saw this, kind of aha moment of like, wait, I got two different, treatment care based on a dentist and the way they approached their craft. So, one might say, wow, there's a unique opportunity here to build something because it's underserved. Then there's another that would say, wait, maybe there's a reason that people aren't building something because the fragmented nature of the dental industry where, it's I would imagine it's a challenging market to sell into with products.
I didn't look at it that sophisticatedly. I should have. I think for me, I knew there was impact and I knew I wanted to work in it. And then the rest, you just figure out. The fact that nobody had done it before, I think too much of myself there, or maybe I don't think about like if it hasn't been in the past, why couldn't it be done? For me, it was like, okay, there is a need. We'll figure out how to monetize it. We didn't know what it would be. I quit my job. We didn't have something. I was just shadowing dentists, trying to figure it out. But I think it was one of the things like having a belief that, we will figure out how to monetize it.
And so that's exactly the question I want to ask you. Like, how did you get started?
So I think there was a time, so I was at QBio and the I really got obsessed with dentistry. I was reading everything I could find online. I was watching every documentary I could find. And there came a point, and I was trying to do my own research, trying to read where the industry was. Why was it this way? And to the point where I felt I wasn't doing justice to my job, where I'm the sort of person that I was, working weekends at QBio. I was, fully involved there. And when I started getting more interested in this over the work I was doing, I basically quit. I don't recommend that to anyone because, that was the first time I didn't have anything my identity got attached to. So I was not in school, or I was not working at a company. I was on my own basically. And there I was trying to figure out what the problem is and just, following my curiosity there and then trying to figure out what am I building to solve the problem that I had faced.
So did you just reach out to dentists and start to understand more of what their pain points were?
So the first dentist that I reached out to was in my building, and they said nothing. There's no need for technology here. We're good, and they gave me reasons. The second dentist was that was the only dentist I knew at that time. The second dentist I met was I was in an Uber ride going from Kendall Square to Harvard Square. So my laziness, I think, had a benefit. So I did not. Walk there. I took an Uber pool, and there was another person in the car who was a Sloan graduate, and we just started talking. And they basically, I started saying, "Hey, I'm working on dentistry," and they said, "Oh, I know a dentist who could be helpful." And so that's how I got to be the second dentist, and I was very lucky there because the dentist, he used to be a professor at Harvard. He had access to 4 practices, and he was kind enough to provide me with the first data and wrote actually the first check. So I did not know what I was doing, but I told him, here's the problem. I'm going to build technology to solve it. And he bought the problem, like he understood the problem, that there was this variation of diagnosis that existed. We didn't have anything. I started just, building like just like mocks of like, hey, this is what we could do, but that's not what ended up happening. But what he was very kind enough to do was he provided me with his data, which I asked for, and that's how we started building the technology.
Got it. Okay. And then how did you end up figuring out, okay, there's an opportunity to build a business here, right? Like, maybe you were starting to build technology, but what's the actual use case where people, pay for?
Yeah. So we built the technology for a bit. So I had the second step there was, okay, I need a dentist on the team as well. That's, where I, and that, got my co-founder as well, who was a dentist. He was a resident at Harvard at that time. And we actually did not try to figure out what the business case would be from the beginning. It was like, let's provide value to the customers, and then we'll, extract some value. If there's enough value, then we will be able to extract some money as well. And so we were trying to solve the problem first, so it took us some time to actually generate revenue.
But how long did it take you to like generate that value, like the problem solve?
So I think the initial demos and the initial thing contracts, we actually signed contracts as well very quickly, but it was based on uh, some prototypes that we had built with the data, and I would say this was around 2018 we started. Around 2019 we had demos to show. We had for using the data, which was pretty significant, that we had gotten hands on, and being able to show the value of the product. And we approached dental practices, as well as we approached insurance companies to say, hey, here's what we can build. Would this be of value to you? And then we signed a contract with one company, with a later delivery date of here. So we were going to deliver this, and here this was being able to analyze X-rays and understand key findings in those X-rays.
Now, when we first started talking, you talked about, it was tough pitching this to investors because it wasn't necessarily the market that they wanted to focus on, or maybe they didn't really understand it yet. So how did you go about raising capital in those earlier days of building the company?
So I used the money first, the money I had. So my parents had written a check to me when I graduated to put down payment on a house. So I took that as my initial seed money, and then utilized the savings I had, and I had worked for a year, so it wasn't like ridiculous amount of savings, but I was lucky that I did a little bit of Bitcoin investing in the early days as well. So I had some, good, and I think you got the first wave at that time too of Bitcoin. So I had enough to be able to support myself, and I supported another colleague for in the beginning. And then the check that I mentioned that the doctor wrote as well. So that's the money we had, and then we raised our first pre-seed fund from E14, MIT E14 fund, and they were the first ones to write a check into Overjet. And here it was this chicken and egg in terms of having the money to build, but also like having something in market to get the funding. And I think that's a tricky thing to build, good or strong or build more advanced technology, where you actually need to spend resources on GPUs and like be able to spend money on annotations, etc. So I think that was the initial stages.
Okay. And then like you have been consistent as far as raising capital. So obviously you were proving the market and scaling because if Crunchbase is accurate. So 2021, your Series A was 27 million, General Catalyst Insight Partners. And then you did another round very quickly after that, a 42.5 million Series B. So what was happening during that time frame? Was it like, okay, we believe in this market, you've got the technology, we've got a lead, here's gas for the fire, go build?
Yeah, so it was also 2021. So if you remember 2021, it was a very exciting time for most startups. But I think for us, first is I think I learned how to raise as well. So I think with our seed and A round, like I think you understood how this raising game is played. But then also I think for us, what happened in 2020, early 2021 was we participated in a lot of RFPs that insurance companies provided, and we won every RFP that we participated in. And that meant we went head on head with every competitor of ours and actually were able to show the value. At the same, so in July 2021, we raised our A round based on that, and then we received our FDA clearance as well. That meant we went into practice, and we thought it will take us longer time there, but as we built out the team and we hired a really good salesperson as well, we just exploded very quickly. I think in the first year alone, 2022, we were able to sign like 60 large organizations. So it was a big expansion that happened, and then we needed resources to be able to fund that expansion. I think because we were building a little bit earlier on the practice side, and the FDA clearance really opened that gate for us, and we were the first ones to receive FDA clearance in the market.
And what was that process like? Like, how difficult was it to get FDA cleared?
I think looking back, because it was the first time, it was hard. But I don't think the process itself is that hard. We just had to make sure that, we did things correctly and collected the right kind of data, did the right kind of studies. But at that time, there was no expert that we could call on to or call on. A lot of the things we had to kind of figure out. We were the predicate. This was the first device that we were getting cleared. So in dental AI, we became the first one to get cleared. The last one was in the 90s, or I think the early, Carestream had gotten a product back in the day with like not your current deep learning technologies as well. So that's one where we had to kind of figure out how to get it done. But now after that, we've now gotten 7 clearances. We've piggybacked on our first clearance and built, and now we have, we know the recipe. So if you told me how to get another clearance, we could probably do it very, very quickly.
So, well, let's break down fast forward to today, the platform. So what does it do? Like, how is it helping patients? How's it helping dentists, insurers? Like, there's the whole value chain here. So how does it all work?
So the way it works is that we are able to analyze clinical data, and that means X-rays, notes, any other practice management data that the practice has added, and be able to then identify things of importance. So if it is a disease, we're able to then quantify the disease and come up with the right treatment recommendations. So. And what we can do is that we can surpass dentist level capabilities by being able to quantify, which a dentist could do, but think about 32 teeth, measuring every surface on that 32 teeth. You're talking about 64 surfaces if all the teeth were there, and then many other measurements that even if a dentist could do it, they would not do it because of the time that it would take them to do it. So being able to do that automatically, and then coming up with very quantitative and objective decision making based on that data that we have collected. And that helps us to provide products on the practice side to help providers provide a much more comprehensive diagnosis, and then communicate with patients, because we can take these quantifications and markups and put them on X-rays that people can use to communicate. But also you can, as you have groups of practices, you can start to provide more consistency of care across your practices. So you can start to measure quality of care that's being provided across your practices, and then utilize the same technology and enable dental insurance companies to review the same data, so that they're looking at this information quantitatively, so that when they're making the determinations, it's not subjective, and then helping them do it much faster, much more accurately, and reduce this back and forth between the payers and providers, which is just inefficiencies or administrative inefficiencies that doesn't help anyone. So how do we get the cost out of the system, which is not going towards patient care? And how do we direct all the dollars towards patient care? And how do we provide the best patient care possible?
Now, the dental industry today, how much of it is like more like I think you mentioned earlier on, like private equity is involved, right? Where they're probably rolling up dental practices, buying them, versus the privately owned, local dentist that runs his own, or she runs her own practice and has her own business, like the entrepreneurial. Like how much, what's that look like in the landscape today?
So there is no official number, but the unofficial number right now, at least the industry thinks it's about 30% is consolidated, and the 70% is still non-consolidated. But I think when I started, so 5 years ago, it was much lower than that. So it was about 15 to 18% people were saying that it was consolidated. So it's actually the speed with which it's consolidating is much faster. So that means all of our customers are growing very fast. They're also getting bigger. They're also combining with other groups, and then there's consolidation happening significantly, and it's changing the dynamics of the industry significantly as well, because the practices which are not associated with these dental groups have to operate more efficiently as well if they actually want to compete with them. So it is, the consolidation has created a need for efficiency, and then the non-consolidation or non-consolidated practices have to play the same game.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to see how technology is evolving in all these industries, and to know that if you are like an entrepreneur and have your own dental practice, that in order to keep up with the ones that are consolidating, you still need to have access to technology, which when I was watching some of the demos of your product, it is well designed from a consumer point of view. And I'd imagine that makes the dentist's life easier too, to be able to show the issues and on a computer screen versus putting an X-ray up that has no meaning for the patient.
Absolutely, and if you go back to where Overjet started from, was basically this confusion around what was happening, and why was the dentist recommending me these different things. So we actually laid that foundation of having visualizations on X-rays in the most consumer or patient-friendly way, such that they can understand. So the color choices are a certain way. To so that the patients can understand. For example, our enamel, we make it white because people think of teeth as white. So if we make enamel white, people are more able to understand that this is enamel. So that helps the dentist communicate with the patients more effectively. And then second is the quantification piece there as well. So it's not just, hey, I'm seeing something. It is about, last time you came, your bone loss was 4 millimeters. Now it's up to 5 millimeters. So you might want to act on this. So I think that is also a reason for patients to act, because I think the issue with patients in dentistry is the fact that they think that if something does not hurt, then they do not need to act on it, which is not true. Like by the time it starts hurting, you would probably need a much more serious treatment compared to the time when, it's not hurting, but the signs are there and an infection is there, or there's a big cavity there as well. So that's something that we actually did it on, and a lot of the technology developed with that in mind. And that's why it developed a certain way where, prior to us, if you look at healthcare, a lot of things were about detection. So put bounding boxes around disease, whether it was the lung nodules or whether it was on pathology slides. And what we said was, yes, putting a box is good, but like if we go and outline that particular lesion and put a certain color on it, like patients will understand that much more than saying there's something in this box. Similarly, if we go and measure the bone levels rather than saying there's a box and there's bone loss, that will help patients understand the longitudinal progression of the disease. So I think that was an approach we took, and now I'm happy that like everybody has understood that that's the better approach, and even people have adopted that approach as well.
So what's the latest at Overjet, which I learned from my research that that's actually the name of your company is a dental term, right?
Exactly. So it is what it means is that your top teeth are ahead of your bottom teeth by 2 to 3 millimeters. That's the overjet that exists. And if it's more than that, people might laugh at you, or you'll have funny teeth or buck teeth. Or if it's less than that, you would have pain. So it talks about the precision in dentistry and how 2 to 3 millimeters actually really matters. And that's, why what Overjet does as well.
Very cool. All right, so what's the latest with the company? You did announce a Series C round of funding back in, was it March of this year? Is that, yeah,
Yeah.
so it was 53.2 million. So where's the company at? Number of employees or whatever data you can share?
So we are about 150 people. One of the important things for us was to raise in this environment, which was, we did back-to-back raises in 2021. So the fact that we had an up round was the reason was that we grew very fast during this time as well, and had to grow into our valuation, and which we were able to do. So I think that's something that the company is pretty proud of. And now I think for us, it is really doubling down on the two products that we've built, but also now building new products for the same customer base. So we're building two new products uh, on the practice side as well as on the payer side, and starting to connect the two together. So a lot of the challenges we feel happen because both sides do not speak the same language. Both sides are spending significant amount of cost on administrative processes, and can we start to bring that cost down? We also believe that the future is not a bot talking to another bot, which that's how it'll end up if the two sides are not served by a a player which wants to actually reduce administrative costs on both sides. So I think for us, it's very important that we start to connect the two and start to ensure and create experiences that cannot be created independently. One of the experience that we want to create is by being able to or allow for real-time claim determination while the patient is in the chair. So the patient understands how much they're going to pay for the particular treatment that they're being asked to do, and not have to get a surprise bill later on, and then and walk out making the appointment and having more certainty there. And similarly, insurance companies allowing for more real-time claim determination, providers being able to offer that to their customers as well.
Can you do that for the healthcare industry at large?
So hopefully, there might be some of the things that we develop that the healthcare industry can take from as well. We did have a conversation with one of the large blues, and they were looking at our architecture and saying, hey, we can copy some of these things on the healthcare side as well.
That would be amazing because that's just been such a problem that no one's been able to solve yet. The price transparency. You just go to the doctor not knowing, and then you get this bill at the end. You're like, what? And you don't know what your insurance is going to cover. And it's such a mess. So if you can help solve that problem, wow, that would be great for
Yeah,
many, many
no,
reasons.
and for us, I think the, things like these have been part of the plan from the beginning, and that's why we went and focused on payers and providers, because we believe in order to solve this, you can't solve it from one side. You do need to solve it from both sides, and we are well positioned to do so.
All right, what's your plans in terms of hiring, like which teams, and what's the culture like? What's it like to work there?
So we are hiring for every team. We are growing, hiring very heavily on engineering and just R&D in general. But I would say, just if there are good people, we hire opportunistically as well. It's hard to find really great people, and if we come across really great people, we hire opportunistically. So if there are people who are watching this and they're looking for a job, and you don't see it on the career page, please just shoot us an email, and would be happy to look at your resume and see if you guys might be a good fit. And in terms of the culture at Overjet, I think for us, as we grow, of course, the culture does evolve, as new people come in, and the speed with which companies like us grow very quickly. In 2 years, there are more new people than there were old people as well. So I think for us, what is really important is the focusing on our values that have gotten us here, and hopefully will get us far as well. And a lot of the things that we focus on there is, having focus on striving for excellence as one of the pieces, and that's how you see it in our products. You see it in how people show up, whether you're thinking about the recruitment processes, or how we try to serve our customers as well. And then second is really having a high velocity, high performance culture where we are trying to do a lot of things and very ambitious things, and the faster we do them, the more we learn and are able to course correct if needed, and then have and provide the greatest amount of impact as well. And I would say this is one where people have entered the company and been like, oh, I thought we were, moving fast in our previous company, and here things are even moving faster. So I think that's one where we want to, not lose our sight around the amount of change we need to make in the industry. And if we want to do it in our lifetimes, we need to go fast and make it happen.
All right, so you mentioned, you learned over time about raising capital in these different rounds that you've raised in. So what advice would you have for other founders that are maybe going after like a underserved market that doesn't have like the same elements that like, fintech or, so what advice would you have on raising capital in those types of markets?
So um, I think whichever market people are operating in, it comes down to the basics. Somebody is giving you money, and is this a good opportunity for them to make more money out of it? Like, even if it's you're doing it for good, or there might be like a lot of impact. In the end, is it a good investment? And here people look at investments in a certain way. Is the team good enough? Is the market good enough? Is the plan such that it's going to generate a lot of value? And I think this is one where I find a lot of, if you're working in a niche, your view of the world gets narrower, and you're saying, hey, if I impact this, and the market is not big enough for that kind of capital to go into your company, because just, if you narrow down the market, of course, the market will look smaller. And then it is about how do you tell the story to go from wherever that initial entry point would be to where you want to get to. And I think this is one where some people, of course, it comes naturally to. For others, I think it can be a learned a skill as well. But being able to see it as, and I think people have a sense of what that would look like, but there might be a little not that confident to actually say, here's my view of the world, and where does it need to actually get to, and where would it get to? And you might be wrong, like, everything doesn't happen exactly as everybody plans, but being able to tell that story and being able to carve that path, and then say, hey, I might not know this, but I can approximate it. I think that's very needed for niche markets, because I think it's harder for people to have examples. They can't just say, oh, you're like a snowflake, where if you're a data company, it's much easier to say that compared to if you were going after podiatry, for example. Like, if you look at that market, it would be very small and niche, but then how do you actually tell your bigger story there?
So how did the Overjet story evolve from the point where investors were like leaning back to when they were like leaning in? Like, how did you evolve the story?
I think when the first time we pitched it, we were very focused on variation of diagnosis as a problem, and you do the math, and then the market just starts to become smaller and smaller, and the value that can be added. However, although the problem initially was variation of diagnosis, but we realized that it was a much bigger problem that we were actually solving with all this unstructured data that can provide a significant amount of value. So I think, that's how the evolution happened. So if you look at my first deck, it will be focused a lot on variation of diagnosis, and then when we get to the market size, it'll become smaller and smaller. And then if you actually look at the decks now, first the market is bigger as well, because I think we've found things that we didn't think were possible as well. Like as you build capabilities, you can do so much more. But also for us, it's like looking at the problem in a different way too. So not narrowing it down completely from where it started off from.
So over the stretch of building Overjet, like what have been the biggest kind of takeaways, lessons learned as, CEO?
I think one of the big ones for me is velocity matters a lot. And this is one where I would say we definitely had a serious focus on it because in the early days we were the underdogs. We didn't have the resources needed. For example, our closest competitor, we had raised 1 million when they raised 11 million. That's how the story started. And we had to compete against them. And we won every deal I mentioned against a player who had raised more than 10 times us. And we were able to do it because it was a lot of focus and a lot of strategy and then just execution at a level that we needed to operate on. So it kind of came because of the constrained resources. And then I think as we got access to more resources, I would say the core like velocity being like super important was a little diluted, and I think a few years ago we just said, hey, no, like this is extremely important, and if we want to make the change that we want to make, then we will have to remove things that just slow us down internally as well. And as the company grew into like multiple layers, how is that communication happening? How are the processes being set up, which doesn't slow us down but actually speeds us up in terms of the impact and the results we can have.
Okay, three apps you can't live without. It can't be Slack, Calendar, or Gmail.
I think now it's Aura. So I wear the Aura ring, and the app that I look at in the morning is Aura. Another app that's on my phone is Opal, which blocks everything. So it blocks Twitter and YouTube and all the others. So that's another app that I have it running all the time. And what's the third one? Huh. As I've blocked all my apps, so I think it's Aura and Opal that are probably on my on my phone. Um, LinkedIn is another one. I don't know if you said you can't talk about
Oh
LinkedIn.
no,
If
you can use LinkedIn. Actually, I don't think many people say LinkedIn. And if you think about it, I bet you it's one of the most used apps. So it's just surprising people don't think of that naturally. So that definitely counts. All right, how about a good like book or podcast recommendation for entrepreneurs?
So I just finished the Seven Powers book. I don't know if anybody has recommended that before. It's about business strategy. Really good book if somebody's thinking, especially if somebody's starting a company. I wish I read it before, but it's a very solid book. And in terms of podcasts, I think there's I think it's called BG2. It's and Acquired. I think those are the two ones that are on my. But I think BG2 is Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner's podcast. So they go through AI trends and VC funding stuff and other interesting topics.
Got it. Okay, yeah, I haven't heard of that one. Acquired. I've been listening to that since the early days, and it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
It's so good. So, what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
So I have a 2-year-old. So I think a lot of my fun activities are surrounding that. So I never thought going to a park was fun, but it's really happening in the park. So if you go to the park, I actually recently started going to the park with my son, and it's I don't know if I'm getting too old that's fun for me now. But the yeah, going to the park with my son.
That's awesome. Well, Wardah, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great work that you and your team are doing at Overjet, and obviously all the great advice.
No, thank you, Keith. Thank you so much for the time and the conversation here.